guys, and welcome to my Patreon VIP. Hello. I'm still working on my intro for my Patreon. But our second video ever for my Patreon, we're going to be reacting to some clips of the Dr. Phil, Matt Walsh transgender conversation. Matt Walsh, I believe, is one of the talking heads of the Daily Wire. And so I'm not going to react to this on my normal YouTube channel because we know how YouTube is. And so we're going to go ahead and react to it on this Patreon. Maybe I'll upload it at some point on Rumble, but it'll be on Patreon first for a while. But alright, so let's get right into it, I guess, and I'll give you my commentary. Alright, here we go.
There's the extreme approach that you are admittedly taking. And then there's also just ordinary people that might not be comfortable with the language change. And it just is awkward. And so they're afraid of not being courteous or being accepting. So there's like these two things. There's actually combating and not being, you don't like transgender, the idea of transgender. That's different than pronouns. But then just for most people, it's just feeling a little bit awkward and unsure and not wanting to hurt or offend somebody.
Well, why is it important for educators to teach about gender identity, gender presentation, and pronouns? Why do you think that's important?
Because there is a difference. There is biological sex, and a lot of times people are conflating sex and gender. So there's biological sex, and then there's gender, and that's a social construct in the sense that just because you're born biologically a female doesn't mean you automatically want to vacuum, for instance, which is usually a feminine activity or conflated that way. And so it's this idea of giving children in age-appropriate ways an understanding that these things aren't set in stone. Gender identity is not tied to biology.
You say that gender's not set in stone.
It's not.
What do you mean?
I mean that's just factually incorrect, saying that. So you have biology is the chromosomal makeup and reproductive organs and all of that. And so that would be sort of the nature side of things. But the nurture side of things is where we see more of gender identities.
All right, so before we get to Matt Walsh, I just want to say my little piece. First of all, I'm going to be reacting to these clips out of order, I guess. So there's multiple clips. I'm not going to react to the entire episode. But before this teacher came on, I believe Matt Walsh was just speaking to the non-binary trans couple, and he was saying very simple, basic biology, scientific, factual statements. He was not being rude. He was not being belligerent. He didn't call anybody out of their name. He didn't use any bigotry type of transphobic remarks or anything like that. He wasn't emotional. He was calm. He just used scientific, biological statements and facts where the majority of the people on this planet believe. So the fact that she tried to take that and make it seem like he's this extremist and just this hateful person is a lot of what the progressive side of people do. They use these sort of emotional, big, exaggerated sort of like language to make very simple, very calm, rational statements seem like they are extreme, pushing normal people to be the extreme, right? A normal, everyday mom, suburban person, anybody living their life is now categorized as extreme for simply having a biological scientific fact as what they go by when it comes to what is sex and gender. So that sucks. Do I think it's important for educators to teach young kids about gender or sex? No. I think that is a conversation between parents. A lot of educators think they are parents now. They think they should overstep that line and do what parents should be doing. Now, if you want to teach that stuff as kids get older, as a major in university or something like that, as a thought piece in sociology or something like that, that's fine. This is not something that it should be brought up, at least initially, to small children. The idea that there is a difference between sex and gender, I do agree that there is a difference between sex and gender. Your sex is your biological makeup, that is how you were born, and then your gender is your expression of that biological sex. So there is a difference, and gender can be a social construct in a way. Like, the idea of vacuuming. By the way, I haven't vacuumed in years. I don't know why that's like a woman thing. I could see what she was saying, like a homemaker, but the vacuuming, I'm never like sitting there like, oh my god, I have this strong desire to vacuum. But anyway, but let's say vacuuming or the color pink or something like that might be seen as a social construct. I don't think your biological sex makes you just drawn to the color pink. It might make you drawn to feminine things, but not necessarily the color pink. So that can be seen as a social construct. So, however, your gender expression is still very tied to your biological sex. Your biological sex very much sort of like your biological sex very much hinders the way you have your gender expression. However, yes, it can be fluid. You can be more masculine as a woman, you can be more feminine as a man or a tomboy or whatever. So it can be fluid, but it doesn't mean that it's not whatsoever connected to your biological sex, like there's completely severed. So I do think they conflate it a lot, because for her, as the person who's speaking, a lot of these transgender or even non-binary, gender fluid queer circles would actually say that her point of view is extreme, because a lot of trans activists say that there is absolutely no difference between men and women, even when it comes to biological sex. That's why they think it's okay for men and women to play in the same sports as opponents and stuff like that, because they don't think there's any difference. So she might be making it there that seem like there's a difference, but not everyone actually believes that same thing she's believing. So she's saying he's extreme, but there are actually trans activists that would think that what she's saying is extreme. But anyway, let's continue.
She began by saying that my view is extreme. Okay, so the view that every single person on Earth has held up until 15 seconds ago is extreme, and the view that almost everyone does right now still hold is extreme, apparently, according to her. But there is this they are conflating gender and sex, because on one hand they say, well, you got your biological sex, but then your gender is whatever social construct. But then they turn around and say that trans women are women. So a man who identifies with the gender, the social construct of womanhood, actually is a woman. So if you can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender just by saying that. So that's the problem.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much, because it's really not that big of a deal.
Oh, yeah. Can I answer that? I'd love to answer that question. I care about the truth. So basic truth matters. I want to live in a society where people care about the truth and we're grounded in truth. Right. I care about children, and these insane ideas about gender are being foisted on kids, and that bothers me quite a bit. I care about the women who are having their opportunities stolen from them. I care quite a bit, yeah.
You are a champion for...
Okay, so this is a talking point that a lot of these people on this side have. Like, why do you care? Nobody cares what you do as an individual in your own personal life. Most people. Some people do care, but most people don't give a crap. But when you start to live in a society where you literally cannot just state facts, that is a concern. Why can't I just state a biological fact without you telling me that I am extreme? That's an issue right there. So that's one. The other thing is when you are moving into the space of children. It's all about the children, right? Think about the children. So when you are taking sort of a very mature conversation and then trying to move it into children's spaces where they don't have the mentality, they don't have the mental development, the emotional development to be able to really grasp and understand these things, and maybe even influencing a small child's behavior or way they develop or grow up or whatever, that is an issue. A lot of parents are concerned about that, especially when educators think it is their job to start teaching kindergartners these things, right? The other one is the women's spaces. Someone once said the reason why the LGBTQ rights thing is different from the trans rights thing at this point anyway, wasn't always, is that LGBT or the gay rights, gay marriage, gay rights, stuff like that, it was literally like, just leave me alone, let me live my life, don't tread on me. It made a lot of sense, except when you're trying to force like a baker to make you a cake or something like that. But for the most part, it made sense to just be like, why do you care what two people do in their own personal life? And it's the same things with trans issues for a while, but now it's treading on other people's rights and liberties. So when you are taking opportunities abilities from women, biological women, you're treading on their rights. When you are making women feel uncomfortable in women-only spaces like rape centers and showers and bathrooms and stuff like that, then you are stepping on their spaces and their rights and their liberties. So that is the reason why people care, because it's no longer like, just leave me alone and let me live my life. It's like, well, also let me tread on you, step on you, disrespect you, don't really give a care about what you think, but still respect my spaces or my feelings or my lived experience or whatever. But anyway, let's get to the next clip.
My name is Matt Walsh, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is about identity and imagination. He identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. So she went on her phone, and there are people telling her that this isn't pretend, he's really a walrus. And his mother takes him to the doctor to have him surgically transitioned and gets him walrus hormone pills, and then eventually tries to drop him off at a zoo to live with other walruses. Not only topping the Amazon charts, my book has taken the world by storm.
You're saying that there should be no construct of gender, just sex. You're either male or female.
Right.
And someone feeling in a mental, emotional way that they don't identify with the sex that they have been biologically created as and assigned at birth based on their genitalia. If they don't feel that way, that there's no construct that describes that, experiences that.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the reality. So you can feel however you want. I mean, I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually in those things. So your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and whenever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional.
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of different things. With children, wow. You know, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like that's why when you hear a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're a 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question. What is a girl? Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or you know, he likes the color pink. That's fine, play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy. And that's a question I would like to throw out to other members of the panel, actually, because just like the 4-year-old can't answer what is a girl, well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. It's like, what is a woman?
Okay, stopping it there. I think he explained the child identifying as a girl very well. Okay, first, before I say that, let me preface this by saying I don't necessarily think being transgender is a delusion. I think it is a mental health issue if you have gender dysphoria. If you are just sort of like, I feel this way this day so that I am, or I feel this way this day so that I am, that's just you playing into whatever your gender expression is, but doesn't necessarily change your gender or sex. However, I don't think it's a delusion. I think if you have gender dysphoria, you have a mental disorder. I think using words like delusion or saying that I can identify as a potato is a little bit hyperbolic, and it kind of just sort of pushes the conversation in a way it might not be the most, people might not be digested as well if you say something like that. Like when people say like, oh, I can identify as a helicopter. It's a little bit hyperbolic, it's a little bit exaggerated to try to make it show how silly it is. But for people who take it really seriously, if you want them to digest your conversation, you should probably just stay away from those sort of things. But I like the way that he explained the child, because a lot of times, yeah, a lot of boys are like, hey, I want to do what my sister is doing, and a lot of little girls be like, hey, I want to do what my brother is doing. When I was a little girl, I wanted to climb trees, I wanted to chase my brother around, I wanted to play sports, I wanted to jump off roofs. They used to jump off the garage roof for some reason, but I used to go right behind them and do it too, jump over fences, play with their G.I. Joes. It did not make me a boy whatsoever. It just made me a tomboy. It just made me a boyish girl. And it's sad or very scary that these kids today can just simply want to follow their little brother, follow their big sister around, and some parent might actually confuse that and think that they actually identify as a different sex or gender, and then put them through these hormones and put these in operations and stuff like that, and they really just was a tomboy or girlish boy or whatever. From what I've heard other psychologists say is when your child ever comes up to you and say, I identify as this, I identify as a boy, if I'm a girl, if I identify as a girl as a boy, or I'm gender fluid or non-binary, what you are supposed to do, from other experts who've said this, is that you're not supposed to give it any attention. You're supposed to respect it and listen to them and hear them out, but you're not supposed to give them any negative or any positive attention, because any of those attentions that you give will push them probably further to a way that maybe hinder them in the long run. If you give them negative attention, most teenagers will do the opposite of what you want, so they will rebel. If you give them positive attention, especially when they're younger, then they want to continue doing those things because they like your positive reinforcement. It feels like a form of love, like, okay, I'm doing something good, my mom likes this, so I'm going to keep doing these things. You're not supposed to give it positive or negative, just hear them out and just let it play out. I mean, not let it play out as in let them go do surgery and get hormones and stuff like that, but let it play out, because for the most part a lot of it might just go away. So don't give it any attention. We're gonna try to finish this out and then I'm gonna cut it. There are more clips, but like I don't want to make this video too long.
Well,
Can you tell me what a woman is?
no, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
how
that's
do you define a female?
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing, when you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies,
Okay.
we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct,
Gotcha.
is
Okay.
a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, but maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce.
Okay, so this is a very common talking point that I've heard a million times. That's why a lot of these people who believe, like, join these collective ideologies, you can kind of already know what their talking points are going to be because they parrot it and regurgitate the same ones over and over again. Not that I'm not saying that the right doesn't do the same thing. However, she didn't listen to anything he said, because he didn't say anything about a woman who can reproduce. He said a female who has reproductive organs. Just because you have reproductive organs doesn't mean you can reproduce. There's a lot of women who have reproductive organs who are barren or whatever, they can't have children, something's wrong, they can't have children. So that's not what he said. She didn't listen to him at all. He gave a very good explanation. I love the point where he made that someone can be dead for hundreds of thousands of years. We can dig up their bones or their dust and still look through microscopes and test and figure out maybe if this person was a male or female. It's really down into your DNA. And that was such a good explanation, and she didn't listen to it whatsoever. She really was just waiting to give a response that had nothing to do with what he actually said. But let's continue.
Maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Woman.
That was a very good response. I have answered the question. You're not going to rope me into this because I already answered it. Now, your turn. And let's go back. Even if someone was born without reproduction organs, there's still a million other things that makes that person female. So that's not the only thing that makes you female. Your DNA. So if someone born without female DNA, then they're not female. So, like, again, this is a very, very common talking point. They always use this. It's just like blah, 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 parrot, regurgitate. Let's continue.
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
But
myself.
you used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right? So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That describes what?
people who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
That doesn't-
And so
I'm not
trans
asking for
women are women too.
Okay.
And you want to hold on,
Say it
hold
again.
on.
Trans
You
women
want
are
to
women.
reduce.
What you
listen,
won't
listen.
even tell me
you
what the
want to
word
reduce,
means, though. So
you
that's
want to
the
reduce
problem.
women. You want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals,
No.
our chromosomes, right? That's what you're
What
saying.
you want to
is that
do is
that's what we're
what
at the end of the day.
you want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood.
Okay.
And turn it into basically a costume that could be worn.
Do you have a story or a
I feel the way about a lot of this. I really like the end statement that he made. You can want to turn womanhood into a costume that you can be worn. I respect trans people. I respect trans people enough not to pretend to know their lived experience, not to pretend that I can understand what it is to be trans, not to pretend that I can understand what it is to have mental disorders or gender dysphoria, which I've heard is torture. I mean, gender dysphoria is like literally taking people's lives. I would never, ever disrespect trans people or trans community to the point where I can be like, oh yeah, I can just put on trans anytime I want and I know exactly what it is like to be trans. No, you don't. I don't, right? So it is really insulting to sort of appropriate womanhood and act as if you know exactly what it feels like to be a woman, to experience womanhood from girlhood up. It's a unique experience. Girlhood to womanhood is a unique experience from boyhood to manhood. Of course, there's some similarities, but there's a unique experience. Your experience as girlhood influences you as a woman, as your experiences as a woman in this world and stuff like that, relationships, friendships. So to pretend that that doesn't exist and that you can just take it on, it's really insulting. And if it is just any experience that anyone can experience it and just call it whatever they want to call it, I can experience the word however I want and just call it a woman, I can experience the word however I want and just call it man, then what is the point? What is the point of transitioning? What is the point of these titles? What is the point of these labels? Period. Right? And why would you want to be a construct anyway if gender is just a social construct? It makes no sense to me. Anyway, guys, tell me what you think in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video on my Patreon, my VIP. Let me know if you like this video or what else you would like to see on my Patreon. You guys have an amazing day. Bye.